Tokyo Disney Resort is unique in a lot of ways, and so are their guests. The parks have some of the most incredible rides, the most stunningly detailed environments, and some super fun parades, but it can sometimes feel like you're doing something wrong, or that everyone else in the park knows something that you don't. So, how can you get on the most rides? Which ones should you prioritize? And what tricks are there for enjoying them even more? I'm Jordan at 8-Bit Theme Park. I live in Tokyo and visit the Disney parks all the time, and today I'm going to talk about some Tokyo Disney ride hacks, which I guarantee will make your trip more easy and enjoyable. I want to start with something I do on almost every ride every time I go because it's so quick and easy, but it can really make your ride so much more fun. And it's something I'd especially recommend if it's your first time riding something. At some theme parks, there are special queues for the front row of a ride, and they can add hours onto your waiting time. At Tokyo Disney, however, there are no queues specifically for the front row of a ride, but if you just ask for the front row, the staff will be happy to accommodate you. They'll normally just ask you to stand to one side whilst you wait for the next vehicle, which is normally just like an extra minute or something. Well worth it to get the best view. I especially recommend this for Journey to the Center of the Earth, Enchanted Tale of Beauty and the Beast, and Splash Mountain, if you don't mind getting a little bit wet. Funnily enough, front row queues aren't the only queue-related service that Tokyo Disney keep a secret. You may be familiar with single rider queues, where guests can join a shorter line and fill in any spare spaces in ride vehicles. This usually means groups will be split up, but can drastically reduce your wait times. Well, unfortunately, Tokyo Disney doesn't use this system on most of their rides, but the ones they do use it on, so few people know about that you'll usually just walk straight on. At Tokyo Disneyland, they have single rider on Splash Mountain and Big Thunder Mountain, and at Tokyo Disney Sea, they have it on Indiana Jones and Raging Spirits. Simply ask the cast member at the entrance of the ride, and they'll tell you where to go. One word of warning though, don't rely on this too much, as sometimes they won't use the single rider queue, so they can be a little bit fickle, especially towards the end of the day. Not so fun fact, they actually built a single rider queue for the Beauty and the Beast ride, but because of the pandemic, they never used it. The signs are still there. Every time I get in the queue and see them, I shed a little tear. But I guess they don't want to stop people from paying to skip the queue, eh? We'll get to the queue skipping options a little bit later, but first let's talk about some things that can make specific rides more enjoyable. Let's start with one of my favorite rides at the resort, and one that is unique to Tokyo Disneyland. Monsters Inc. Ride and Go Seek is a wacky and whimsical interactive dark ride in which riders play a game of flashlight tag throughout Monstropolis. Some people are disappointed to find out that there's no scoring in the ride, but I think they're missing the point. I love that instead of being rewarded by a number going up and being semi-distracted by your score and the targets, instead the ride encourages you to pay attention and explore the environment and then rewards you for your finds with some fun gags. One thing to note though, anyone who's watched my Every Ride at Tokyo Disneyland Ranked video will be aware that whilst Monsters Inc. is one of my favourite rides, it has probably my least favourite ride vehicles. They're really lacking in legroom, and whilst you may be able to squeeze in, I'd really suggest splitting up your group if it's cramped, as the vehicles have a tendency to stop very suddenly during the ride, which can really be uncomfortable. Don't worry, the vehicles work like a little train, so you'll still be able to see your group and you'll still feel like you're riding together. Monsters Inc. Ride and Go Seek isn't the only interactive ride at the resort that's based on a Pixar movie franchise. There's also a dark ride based on the classic Pixar movie franchise Toy Story, in which you fire at targets while seeing familiar characters and larger-than-life toys from the films. And there's also a dark ride based on the classic Pixar movie franchise Toy Story, in which you fire at targets while seeing familiar characters and larger-than-life toys from the films. I will never understand why the two shooting rides Disney have ever made have both been based on Toy Story. It suggests a slight lack of imagination, don't you think? Anyway, I won't talk about these rides too much, as they're basically identical to the versions in the other parks around the world. I'm going to let you know how you can see which rides are similar later on, but there are some tips that can help you get a higher score. In Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters, there are different shaped targets, with each one giving a different score. A circle is worth 100 points, a square is 1,000, a diamond is 5,000, and a triangle is 10,000. That means a triangle is worth 100 times the circle targets. As I said before, I don't love how the scoring can distract you from enjoying the sets and the figures on the ride, but knowing which targets are worth more points can really add to the game aspect of the ride. Such a great feeling seeing a 10,000 add onto your score after you've made a tricky shot. Toy Story Mania also has targets worth more points than others, but it's a little bit more complicated. One of my favourite things about this one though is Each screen has a different secret that you can open up, which gives you loads of extra points. There's a bit too much of that to get into here, but my favourite is if you can get the hoops around all of the LGMs on the rocket flies away and a giant robot appears, giving you loads of points every time you shoot into its mouth. You'll have to work together with your partner though, because they come back really fast. Good luck. As I said, there's a chance you'll already know some of that stuff if you've been to the other Disney parks around the world, as these rides are basically identical. But it can be really difficult to know which rides are copies of the ones you've been on before, and which are unique to Tokyo Disney. On top of that, are there any rides which have any English in them so I can actually understand what's going on? Well, the Tokyo Disney website isn't great for this kind of information, and I haven't really been able to find a good place for it online anywhere, so I made one myself. In the description, you'll find my totally free ride comparison guides. Simply choose which park you've been to before, and you can see this handy guide which tells you how similar each ride is to what you've been on before, as well as what language the ride is presented in. Again, it's totally free and you can find it in the description for this video. Please let me know in the comments if that's useful for you. So, while we're in Tokyo Disney Sea, this might be cheating for a ride hacks video, but one of my biggest tips for this park is to actually not get too hung up on the rides. This is why I highly recommend more than one day here if you're a theme park head, because on your first day, it's hard not to feel like you have to get on all the incredible rides, but the park itself is an attraction and one that will blow you away if you give it the chance. So try to work some time into your day where you just grab a snack in one hand, a beverage in the other, and just wander around the most beautiful and highly detailed theme park in the world. You won't regret it. As for ride hacks here though, there's one that took me a while to figure out. If you've already watched my Every Ride at Disney Sea ranked video, you'll know that I love the transit steamer line. As I just said, the park is so stunning and has to be wandered around to be appreciated, but sitting in a boat and seeing the whole park from the water is perhaps even more special. The tip I have for this ride though is if you want to ride it to get a great look at the entire park, then you'll want to board from Cape Cod, as from this port the boats do a round tour. From Lost River Delta and Mediterranean Harbour, however, the boats will drop you off at the other port, and there's no staying on. Of course you could simply queue up again and ride back, but the round trip is a wonderful way to rest your feet while taking in the sights and sounds of this special park. Oh, one other thing, the transit steamer line will stop during any big shows on Mediterranean Harbour, so watch out, especially if you want to get a night ride, as you won't be able to do it during Believe Sea of Dreams. The same goes for the Venetian gondolas, which is kind of a shame. Imagine seeing this from a gondola in the harbour. Extremely unsafe? Probably. Unforgettable? Absolutely. While we're talking transport, let's hop back to Tokyo Disneyland and head to Adventureland, where you'll see the Jungle Cruise. I have a great tip for that ride, but first I want to talk about the ride that shares a station with it, the Western River Railroad. Unlike the trains in all of the other castle parks, sorry Shanghai, not you, this one only has one station. Like the round trips on the transit steamers, I really enjoy that this ride is purely for the enjoyment of it, and it's a really delightful experience. You get wonderful views of the most beautiful parts of this park, and then get a great finale seeing the Primeval World diorama before heading back into the station. Right below the train station is the station for the Jungle Cruise. The ride had a big update in 2014, which made it quite different to the other ones around the world. For one, they have music throughout the ride, but what really makes it stand out to me is the way the ride looks at night. I in fact barely ever ride it in the daytime because the night is just that much better. So I know those evening hours are precious when we have 9 PM closing every night, but if you get the chance, do check this one out at nighttime. Other rides I'd recommend trying at night are Big Thunder Mountain, Raging Spirits, Aquatopia, and the Venetian Gondolas. But again, it can be tricky to get on those as they close during the show, so watch out for that one. Riding at night can totally transform a ride, but did you know that even some indoor rides can be different each time you ride them? Sometimes, especially for boat rides, the queue will split into a left and right queue, but these usually just end up getting you in the different cars for the same ride. This happens on Pirates of the Caribbean, Sinbad's Storybook Adventure, It's a Small World, and Indiana Jones Adventure. There's one ride, however, where this choice can make a huge difference to your ride. At Disney Sea, there's a ride with two sides that go completely different places. At a glance, Aquatopia seems like one big ride with vehicles just going all over the place, but it's actually two separate rides that are right next to each other. If you want to be close to the waterfall and be able to see Port Discovery and the electric railway, you'll want to go on the left side. If you'd prefer to be on the ocean side, seeing the transit steamer go by, then you'll want to go on the right. The movement of the vehicles still isn't certain as there are a few different ride paths on each side. Something fun is to go on the right and hope to be the one vehicle that goes through the cave. My mum and daughter went on this 3 times trying to go through the cave, and they were not happy when mine and my wife's vehicle went through it every time instead. Sorry, Mum. Fun fact about Aquatopia, although it wasn't the first trackless ride in a theme park, it was the first one to be designed. Imagineer Eddie Soto used the already designed Aquatopia ride system to sell the idea of a trackless indoor dark ride to Tokyo Disney. He then found out that the system needed a complete overhaul, as Aquatopia relied on a series of receivers around the ride, but inside with a dark ride with walls, this wouldn't work. Thankfully, they persevered and we ended up with the one-of-a-kind Pooh's Honey Hunt, which also has some different routes through the ride. 3 to be exact. If you want to try all 3 different routes through the ride, be sure to remember which vehicle you boarded on, as the front, middle, and back vehicles all go slightly different ways. And if you ask a cast member for a specific vehicle, they'll be happy to help. If you're familiar with the other trackless dark ride at Tokyo Disneyland, you may be thinking that you can do the same thing there, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work in the same way. The Enchanted Tale of Beauty and the Beast has 6 different routes that the vehicles take, but they're not based on the starting positions of the vehicles. Instead, they're based on the order in which the vehicles are dispatched, so unless you purposefully take a really long time to sit down, please do not do that, there's no real way of choosing which route you'll take on the ride. There's another ride that has some different ways of riding it depending on your vehicle, but this version is only operational in the spring to help entice college students to come and visit after their exams. The super cool thing about this temporary version is that it adds some extra thrills to a ride that can feel a little disappointing compared to the other versions around the world, at least in terms of the thrill factor. The Tower of Terror at Tokyo Disney Sea has an exceptional exterior, queue line, and pre-show, but all of that build-up can make the 3 drops of the ride feel a little underwhelming. That's why I love the spring version, where there are 2 different ride cycles, which both have way more drops. My favorite one is the one that takes you to the top and then slowly crawls down before plummeting all the way. If you watch the shafts from off-ride for a while, you'll be able to see that these different versions are allocated to each different shaft. So, like Pooh, you can ask the CM for a specific shaft to get a certain ride cycle. Do remember though, this is only during the spring, so it's best to check the website for the specific dates. Spring is actually a really nice time to visit, as crowds are relatively low and the weather is ideal, as long as you can avoid the rain. But one thing I've mentioned again and again that you must do before choosing the dates for your visit is to check the website, go to the attractions page, scroll all the way to the bottom, and see the temporary closures. As the parks are open every day of the year, they do need to close rides for maintenance, and the parks do this pretty regularly here. Which is great, as the rides are very, very reliable, but it does mean that sometimes one or even more of the best rides are closed during your visit, which can be a nightmare if it's your once-in-a-lifetime trip, so be sure to check the website to see which rides will be open on which date. Another thing to be aware of when choosing which dates you should visit the parks is of course the crowds. Avoid Saturdays at all costs. You can get a vague idea of the crowds by looking at the ticket prices, but Sundays, even though they're a little more expensive, can actually end up being quite a bit less busy than Mondays and even other weekdays a lot of the time, for whatever reason. The busiest times of the year are summer, Halloween, and Christmas, so I usually suggest January if you don't mind the cold, or April if you prefer nicer weather. October is great weather-wise, but you can expect the parks to be a bit busier. But you do get the added bonus of seeing the amazing costumes that the guests dress up in. Whichever time of year you do choose to visit though, just make sure you check that ride closures list first. If you do happen to be in the parks on a very busy day, don't worry, there's still loads of great stuff you can do without having to wait 3 hours or pay extra to skip a queue. And even if the parks aren't crazy busy, I'd still recommend some of this stuff anyway. The omnibus at Tokyo Disneyland and the big city vehicles at Tokyo Disney Sea never have more than a 5-minute wait, but they're novel and pleasant ways of resting your feet, getting some good pictures, and just soaking up the atmosphere and details of these gorgeous areas. A nice sit-down ride, as my mum would say. I'll do a whole video on the hidden gems of each park at some point, so if you'd like to know more of those, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that video. Back to something more ride-specific. Over in Mysterious Island, the greatest theme park land in the world, there are 2 very unique attractions that are not to be missed. Journey to the Center of the Earth is one ride you absolutely should ask for the front row on, like I said earlier, but the other ride in this area, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, is one of the only rides I would actually recommend not sitting at the front on. The vehicles have 3 seats facing left, right, and straight ahead, with each one having a little window to look through. And whilst every seat does offer a unique experience, I really think the sides give you a better view of the sets and animatronics, whereas at the front you're normally looking at a large open space where the vehicle is about to go. It can be tempting to sit at the front because we're so used to that being the best view, and you know, it is still a good view, but I'd recommend a ride through on either side first so you can see everything this ride has to offer. It might surprise you that the best position is not the middle one, as this is usually the case on rides. Anyone who frequently visits Disney parks will know that in 3D and animatronic shows, you don't want to be the first one through the door. This is especially true in Tokyo Disney Resort, where guests will follow the rules and actually move all the way to the end, filling every available space. For this reason, you shouldn't rush through into the 3D shows. Take your time and try to get into around the middle of the crowd so you can sit in the middle of your row. Tokyo Disney Resort is considered the best in the world by many. After 40 years of delivering this to a devoted audience, the local guests absolutely adore these parks. But with no annual passes, they all want to make the most of their full-price day tickets, which means they arrive very early. No, even earlier than you're thinking. You may have heard about this and be thinking, okay, I'll get there before the parks open, but here, if you're on time, you're late. The parks currently have a posted opening time of 9 AM, but the gates usually open around 8:20, and guests usually start arriving 2 hours before that. During seasonal events, guests will even arrive as early as midnight the night before. Yeah, which really makes me worry about the opening of Fantasy Springs at Disney Sea next summer. If people wait that long for a seasonal parade, how long are they going to wait for a brand new land with 4 new rides? There are 2 ways you can deal with the crowds. The obvious one is to join in, get there early and make the most of your day. But if you have multiple days at the parks and you'd rather avoid waiting around in massive crowds and waking up early, if you turn up around 10 AM, you can normally stroll right through the entrance stress-free. Unfortunately, this will result in a lower ride count though, as you'll not only miss that first hour of the parks being open, but you'll also be late to get priority passes or DPA. If you don't know what those are, they're basically ways of skipping the queues, with the first one being included with admission and the other one an extra fee. I've talked about them in more detail in another video already, but basically they both work on a first come first serve basis, so being in the park early can really help you to make the most of these systems. This next one's something I always do, and it can get you on one of the most popular rides at Tokyo Disneyland with a pretty short wait, even on busier days. You will have to sacrifice a bit of nighttime entertainment, but no, I'm not suggesting that you miss the only Disney nighttime parade in the world. I still find it crazy that Tokyo Disneyland is the only Disney park in the world with a nighttime parade, but anyway, the thing I usually do, and what I would suggest if the parade isn't massively important to you, is to watch the parade across from the Haunted Mansion. This is where the parade starts, and the parade is really long and wraps around most of the park, so a lot of guests get stuck in areas of the park and not able to move around, even if they want to. Of course, a lot of other guests are sat watching the parades, but if you've watched the nighttime parade from Fantasyland, you'll be able to quickly walk over to Pooh's Honey Hunt and have a minimal wait. You'll even get to see the floats again as they go past the queue line. The priority pass system can make this tip not work quite so well, as a lot of people will skip the queue right afterwards. If you want to know more about the different queue skipping passes, as well as everything else I wish I knew before I ever visited Tokyo Disney Resort, then you should watch this video.